All right, everybody, we are live. Just the drill. Just letting everybody get in here. I'm just gonna go retweet my live stream real fast. Hold on. Hopefully everybody's doing good today. I would like to know where everybody's at. If you want to go ahead and throw that up in the old chat. Sorry, I'm a little distracted here for a second. All right. And we are live. How's everybody doing today? I'm messing with the lighting a little bit, so if you see some shadows or something behind me, I'm trying to get the lighting a little bit better. So that's happening right now. Let's go ahead and see. Let's go ahead and see here where we got people from. Russia. Do I like tennis? Never been a fan. Florida, South Africa, greetings from Sicily, Charleston, Virginia, Norway, Rome, Italy, UK, Huntington Beach, California, Philly, Ottawa, Pakistan, everybody from around the world. Hello, hello, Serbia, Mexico, Pennsylvania, Budapest, Alabama, Georgia. Awesome, guys. Well, welcome in to episode number 98 of Calibrated Live. I am, of course, Scott. Before we get started, if you guys would not mind going and giving this a like, clicking that little notification bell so you guys are notified every time I go live. And also, if you are new here, please subscribe. It is the easiest way you guys can support me. We've been going up. So I have very much appreciated every one of you. You guys are killing it. Be sure, if you want access to more of my content and regular updates, you go follow me on Telegram, Twitter, and over on my Patreon. You can find those links in the description of the YouTube video. Thank you so much to all of my Patreon supporters. You guys are killing it. The new episode of Demonetized should be out probably tomorrow. I just now have enough combat footage to get an episode of Demonetized together. So be on the lookout for that. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into some map updates. We've got a lot to talk about. First and foremost, the biggest thing that is happening across the map right now, across the front, is the current unfolding situation around Vuhledar. We are going to dive into that a little bit later in the episode. That is going to be the last of the map updates, so stay tuned through all of the map updates till we get to that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. My new mic and setup and everything got delayed a little bit. Apparently there was a back order, so my new mic and I'm going to change rooms that I'm in and everything. So that will be happening probably in a week or two. Not sure exactly. All right, so no changes in the Kharkov direction, at least that we have mapped. This doesn't necessarily mean that there are no changes. It's just there haven't been any updates from this area. Probably still a lot of fighting going on in this area. The Ukrainians have continuously rotated reserves up here, trying to hold back the Russian offensive that is cutting off the Ukrainian salient in the Kursk region. But no big changes in the on the map right here for right now. Same goes for the Vovchansk area in the Kharkov region. No major updates. Moving down here to Pishani, Russian forces have advanced through some more fields, captured a fortification in this area right here, and are now directly poised to push into Kurlahivka right here. So again, up against the Oskol River. This part of the Oskol River is much wider, and basically you can't cross it at very many points along this entire section. So the fact that the Russians have pushed and closed this entire line of logistics has put a lot of pressure on this entire salient here. And it's going to only get worse. Now logistics has to come up through the south for this entire section. Russian drones, reconnaissance drones, can now watch these roads and all logistics that are coming up to this area will be potentially interdicted. So logistically, the situation has just become much more complicated for the Ukrainians in this region. And once the Russians reach the Oskol, and more importantly, this highway that runs along the Oskol, they should begin to progress north towards Kupiansk and south towards Leman and Izum down here as they gain access to the actual paved road. Down here, south of Makivka in the LPR, by the way, the Luhansk People's Republic is almost entirely recaptured. There is a small portion right here that needs to be captured in Seversk. But outside of that, the Syryansky Forestry, and then just this little section right here is the last remaining part of the Luhansk Oblast that is not under Russian control. So it's like 99% captured. The Russians just have to push out a couple more kilometers along this line here to completely capture the Luhansk Oblast. But south of Makivka, the Russians have advanced the front along the Zhibyets River right here and have captured the village of Neveske. This is important because this Zhibyets River region was so much of the Ukrainian offensive in the Kharkov region. The whole Izium area, this area over here, this all came very, very easy for the Ukrainians because the Russians were just retreating. But once they got on this side of the Oskol, this is where the fighting became very, very brutal for the AFU. And particularly on approach to Kremenna, it got a lot worse. A lot of Ukrainians died in this region. A lot of very, very well-trained Ukrainians. A lot of the original Ukrainian army, in fact, a lot of the guys that served in the Donbass over the 8 years of civil war were utilized in this region, and they lost a lot of lives trying to push to Kremenna, and they never achieved it. So these advances are not hugely significant to the overall picture, but symbolically, they're very important because this is something that the Ukrainians have been holding on to tooth and nail for a very, very long time. Okay. No updates from Chasiv Yar, no updates from the Klishchevka area, but we do have some updates now in the New York and Toretsk region. We actually have a couple of updates, and I haven't mapped the one specific update that's more south. I'm going to talk about it, but that update will come at a later time. Just because I don't know exactly where the Russians stopped, how much they control, and I do believe that the Ukrainians have retreated, so I will map it out for you guys just to show you. But first and foremost, the Russians have advanced in central Toretsk, capturing almost all of the high-rise building area. This is very, very important. The Russians are now in the heart of Toretsk, the defensive heart of Toretsk at least, but I would also say the actual heart of Toretsk, right in the dead center. This is the industrial zone that the Ukrainians want to utilize for defense of the city, along with these Terikons industrial waste mounds. But the Russians are already in the center of the city, and Ukrainians are struggling to prevent Russian advances. Secondly, the southern Terikon next to the penal colony has been completely captured. This is going to force the Ukrainians out of this pocket almost entirely, along with this northern advance and the southern advance. This pocket is likely mostly gray zone as it is already. But Toretsk is on the verge of falling, basically. All of the strategic or at least tactical advantages that the Ukrainians were enjoying in the city are now nullified. The Russians now control all of the high ground. I'm actually going to take us over to the topographical map just to show you what the Russians sort of are controlling in the region right now. Sorry, I was looking at a different area. But if you can see here, this is the here's the high ground that the Russians control the entirety of. They just captured this Terikon right here. Here is the penal colony. Let me make sure that you guys can see that. Oh yeah, you can. Okay. Here is the penal colony that the Russians captured. Here is the other two southern Terracones that I said were vital for the Russian push into Toretsk. The Russians are now here. So anything significant about Toretsk in terms of defense has been completely nullified as the Russians control the high ground. They are in this defensive center of the city. And with this push, with the push up here by Kleshchevka, leveling it out along the canal, the logistics lines into Toretsk will be threatened soon. So the Battle of Toretsk is definitely coming to a rapid close. And it's just not being paid attention to at all, almost throughout the entire information space, because there's so many other major things happening, such as Vuhledar, Pokrovsk, Kursk. All of this stuff is happening. So this major battle that's unfolding and that the Ukrainians are losing handily in New York and Toretsk is almost going under the radar just because of how bad the rest of the situation on the front is for the AFU. All right. We did have a geolocated Russian advance that went all the way up this road and ended in the town of Leonidivka right here. So I'm just going to, for now, put this into unconfirmed Russian advance. It looked almost exactly like this on other mapping sources such as Syriac. So I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. The geolocation was here. There was an armored assault. And just for your guys' own information, again, the Ukrainians have likely retreated from Nevelpivka here and this entire open area. I mean, there's not much to defend. There is a car racing track, though. So the Russians have just inherited a new racetrack. Vroom, vroom. But this is a pretty major advance, although in terms of the tactical aspects of the battle for Toretsk, New York, that conglomeration, when we're looking at the topographical map, you can see that this is just a valley. So tactically speaking, the Ukrainians probably don't want to sit here for very much longer now that the Russians control all of the tactical high ground in the region. So this is just going to be an incredibly difficult area for the Ukrainians to defend as Toretsk continues to fall. Yeah, so expect some pretty big movement on the Toretsk front. The Russians will likely be at Konstantinivka rather soon in terms of the bigger picture of the conflict. I'm thinking sometime in October, the Russians will either reach Konstantinivka from the north or from the Toretsk eastern direction. Okay. Back over to the map. Okay. So yeah, Toretsk, the situation, it is almost getting to the point where the Russians are controlling more than half of the general urban area, which is going to be basically the end of the Ukrainian defense of this region. And then the retreat back to Konstantinivka is going to be much more difficult than previous withdrawals, especially if the Russians make any progress here towards Bielogora or Stopochki. Okay, now we're getting into the bulk of the updates, the bulk of the important updates. So while Toretsk is important, these are, war deciding basically updates here. So in East Horivka, the Russians have captured the majority remaining portion of the town, along with the large fortification here just east or just west of the town, and are now poised to push for Pramen here and Minorad. So it is very likely that we will see the start of the Battle of Minorad very, 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 very soon after this capture and after the Russians completely capture this Ukrainian trench line. All right, moving south, just west of Novohordivka, the Russians have captured the #2 mine along with the Terrakon. Not a big advance, but again, from a tactical aspect, I will take us over to the topographical map just so you guys can see how the entire area that the Russians are pushing in near Pokrovsk is now they control a majority of the high ground. So they control this Terikon waste heap. They control this one. They control this one now. This is the one we just talked about outside of Novohradivka. They control this one in Seledove, this one also in Seledove, and then they now control the large Terikon in Ukrainsk and this secondary Terikon and most of this high ground now east of Ukrainsk. So the Russians are doing what the Russians normally do and are just continuously capturing the important vital high grounds and then forcing the Ukrainians out of those high grounds or forcing the Ukrainians away from those high grounds once the high ground is captured. So here are the two Terikons in Seledove that I talked about on the topographical map. And then here is the dominant Terikon in Ukrainsk. And here is the secondary Terikon in the older abandoned mine here. You can see that once the hill starts growing trees, it's likely that the mine is not being utilized anymore. Unlike this one that's still being used, you can see that it's not growing vegetation. So this mine has been captured. The Russians have also pushed in to the town of Tsukrini, which is very, 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 very bad for the Ukrainians in this pocket. If you guys see here, this town is basically the connection. So once the Russians get onto this road or this railroad here, we do know that the Russians like to push railroads. I think that they're going to push north along this railroad and get behind Seledove, as well as south along this railroad here, the same railroad, but just in the southern direction, and push into these towns, thereby cutting off the remaining open lines of logistics into Hrinki and Korahivka. Remember that this Novelske pocket right here just collapsed, and we're already looking at the next pocket beginning to collapse. So the Ukrainians haven't been able to stabilize a single point of the front line, even after the massive rotation of reinforcements to the Pokrovsk front. It's just been this continuous deterioration, this continuous snowballing, and Russian gains in the region are getting larger and more significant with each passing week. Much as I had explained back in April or May when I put out my prediction video, we're not even to the end of summer yet, like officially. So the summer offensive is still technically going on. It's going to obviously roll into a fall offensive, but we are reaching the point that I had talked about where this entire defense line here from Pokrovsk down to Vuhledar, Velika Novoselka area is just completely compromised now. And the Russians will likely gain a massive chunk here by, I would say, December for sure. We could be looking at a completely different frontline situation where, Kharkov is under Russian control. This entire southern chunk right here is under Russian control. And the Ukrainians are basically going to have to pull out to Vuhledar. And then we were going to see some very dynamic movement by the Russians in this giant open area. So quite in line with what I've been saying for months. But anything can happen. So, yeah. All right. Moving over just south of Ukrainsk, the Russian forces have again advanced, sort of similar to this advance. It's a similar push. I just have it marked as two different updates because they were two different updates at the time. And this has just basically brought more of the front into Hrinki than was previously. Over here, just east of Hrinki, the Russians have advanced south of Zeleny Persha, captured this large fortification here, which the Ukrainians have been stubbornly holding for a couple of weeks now, and have captured all of Zeleny Druha. So again, this pocket is in a very, very difficult situation. If the Russians are able to capture this area right here, they will cut basically the last line of logistics into Hrinki. Other than this southern area where there are some roads that connect through this industrial area. However, once you get to the point where all logistics are coming on a few, coming through a small targetable zone, you just get a road of death into this area. So my expectation is that the Ukrainians are going to hold as hard as they can here because there's really nothing left behind. And the Russians are really going to start abusing this area with FPV drones, Landsats, everything. The roads here heading into this salient are just going to become an absolute nightmare for the Ukrainians. And this salient will not take as long as Novelske did to fall. It is just very isolated. It is hard to retreat out of. The Ukrainians cannot retreat south. These bridges over the reservoir here north of Kharkov have all been blown by the Russians. So the only way for the Ukrainians to now get out of this pocket is to retreat all the way around the reservoir here. The situation is just not good. Basically, what we're looking at is a new pocket forming, and the reality of this new pocket is going to be something like this. Something like that. This entire pocket is now a very poor place for the Ukrainians to sit. The Russians control the dominant high ground. The Ukrainians still do control this high ground here, which does support operations in this region, but it's just getting worse and worse and worse, and this is just going to continue to decay and deteriorate. Okay. How's everybody doing? 21 minutes in. Sorry, we have a lot of updates today. Sorry, I'm not watching the chat. I hope everybody is doing fantastic. Remember, guys, like, comment, subscribe, and check out the video description for links to my other work. All right, let's get back into it. Moving down here, the Russian forces have just completely captured this penal colony as well as closed the gap between Hostre and the penal colony. So not a major advance, but it does put Ukrainian positions in Maximalivka in a very, very poor position. And we can likely expect a retreat from this settlement to these fortifications and this new defense line being set up in front of Kharkov. All right, now to the final update of the day, guys. The Vuhledar section of the front. Obviously, we call it Vuhledar, but on the map it is Vuhledar, so I will call it Vuhledar for the people who do not know some of the alternative names for these places. As you can see, the Russians have just exploded out of this region. They have completely crossed the Kalashaka River here, which was a strong dividing line. It was really part of the reason why it was so difficult for the Russians to move up into this area. They do have to cross a river, and it is very tight in some areas crossing said river. But the Russians have closed this gap and have pushed up into the Dacha area just east of Vuhledar, as well as have advanced onto the high ground here west of Vuhledar, and are continuing to push towards Novo Ukrainica here. So, yeah, the situation in Vuhledar is basically a wrap. There are still claimed Ukrainian units in the area. If you guys remember, about a month ago, the 72nd Brigade was pulled out and moved to the Pokrovsk-Kharkov front to try to stop the Russian advance there. They were replaced by territorial defense units. Those territorial defense units suffered incredible casualties, basically collapsed because they weren't the proper strength to defend this area the way that the Russians were pushing. The Russians also saw that this change happened. The Ukrainians knew they were going to lose Vuhledar. And so once this change happened, the Russians capitalized on that. And now we are seeing the collapse of the southern front of the AFU. This is what I talked about, guys. This is the linchpin. Once this falls, everything rips wide open. The Russians will advance quickly to these settlements. These settlements are nothing to defend. There's nothing here to defend for the Ukrainians. There are no defensive lines set up. There's nothing of any significance in this area now. This was the line. There is a reason why Vuhledar was so important, and the Ukrainians defended it tooth and nail for so long. Guys, look at how important this is. It is, first off, the connecting area, the connecting corner of the southern and eastern front lines. So it is, if this corner moves, the entire front moves with it. You know, the southern front will move up in this area, and the eastern front will continue progressing quicker around Pokrovsk and Dashani, Kharkove here. So this is important to capture. It's going to increase the pressure on this entire southern line, which means that the Ukrainians are going to have to find some reserves to come down here and stabilize this, or the Russians are going to exploit it and push into this wide open area. And then the defense of Pokrovsk, the defense of the entire east, just does not matter at all anymore. So Vuhledar, very, very, very important. It is about to fall. The Russians have it surrounded. It is being reported that the Russians have already entered the city, or the township of Vuhledar, and it will likely be captured today, or tomorrow, or the next day, depending on when the updates come out. But this is not the most important aspect anymore. Vuhledar is done. Don't focus on it. If you're a pro-Russian, don't celebrate it, because it's not what is important right now. What is important is that the Russians capitalize on this linchpin falling. They push up aggressively to the next line of defense, potentially beginning an operation towards Velika Novosilka. That would be my guess, just because all of the roads come to Velika Novosilka. So you can branch out east, north, and west. As well as, I believe we are going to see the beginning of an operation towards the city of Zaporozhye in earnest. So this is my new prediction. I don't think that the Russians are really going to do something in the Sumy region. I believe that they're going to push the Ukrainians out of the Kursk region, but there's not a lot of strategic relevance in the Sumy region. You could try to pull forces, but you could do that anywhere across the map. In Zaporozhye, if you begin to cut some of the highways in the south, like this highway right here, it makes the logistic situation in the south incredibly difficult for the AFU. So I believe we may see an operation to try to take Orikhiv. Again, look at where all the roads lead. Once you have Orikhiv captured, you can move north here. And again, there is nothing. There is just nothing. If I were the Russians, I would almost consider building up a massive amount of forces in this southern direction, capturing Orikhiv, and then just breaking through north and committing very, very hard in that direction. Do I think the Russians are going to do this? Probably not. The Russians seem to still be going at their own pace, taking what the Ukrainians sacrifice, basically, without expending a huge amount of resources. An offensive like this would probably expend a massive amount of resources. However, I do think that the area is now ripe for an offensive. I don't know if it's going to be towards Polyapolye, towards Orikhiv, or actually towards the city of Zaporozhye itself. Again, it doesn't have to be overly successful. All it needs to do is pull some amount of forces away from this area, or this area, or this area. Basically, anywhere from the east, if Ukrainian forces are pulled to deal with anything on the southern front, that would be a huge win for the Russians. And then they could then capitalize on that by pushing into the Donetsk area. So I don't know when this might happen, but I do think before the New Year's, we will see activation along the southern front, more than the activation we are currently seeing. We actually do have a small update. The Russian forces have captured the fortification that is just north of Robotine, which, again, is basically setting up the Russians to begin an offensive in the direction of Orikhiv now. So I do think that this is where we are going to see the next big Russian offensive, along with the continuation of the offensive in the Vuhledar, Kharkove area. I think that this pocket right here is now the primary goal of the Russians, pushing down, putting pressure on Kharkove from the north as well as from the south, and just collapsing this entire pocket, gaining access to this roadway right here. And then again, it basically goes, the line right now is here from Marinka down to Vuhledar, and then up to Velika Novosilka. That's the current line, right? This is the current line. It is now compromised, but that's the wrong color to choose. That is the current line right now. You can see it's compromised. The Russians are now through it. The next line of defense for the Ukrainians is going to be along this road, basically, through these settlements. And this is going to be much more difficult to defend. It is not established. It does not have solid logistics out of a place like Kharkov, especially if Kharkov is being pressured very greatly. There's just nothing back here, guys. So this is why Vuhledar is so important. It's why it's such a big deal. It's why it's been talked about so frequently, and it's why the Ukrainians are in a freak-out mode, because behind it there is just nothing substantial, and the Russians are going to exploit this entire region right now. And this is the remaining area of the Donetsk Oblast. So they are at least going to go this far. Velika Novoselka, this entire area out here is going to be captured by the Russians, right? So just be watching this southern Donetsk area. I've been telling you guys for months. I know you guys listen, but this is where the offensive is happening. It is the primary goal. Vuhledar, Kharkov, Pokrovsk, and then pushing out to Povrahad. That it's going to be the easiest route for the Russians to basically capitulate the Ukrainians in the east. All right. Scott, why do your map changes not save on your map? I don't know, man. Sometimes when I go in and I do stuff, and then if I like refresh the page, if I don't, sometimes they just disappear. It's very frustrating. Like, let me refresh real fast. Okay, so they stayed this time, but yeah, but sometimes they just disappear. I don't know. It's like they don't save and they're not updated, and then they just go away. So I don't know. It's very annoying. Trust me. I live in that. All right. If you guys have some questions, go ahead and get some questions in. Remember, if you ask with Super Chat, I will absolutely get to them. I put them up on the screen and everything. If you want to ask questions in the regular chat, you are more than welcome to. I might not see them. I might not get to them if that's the case. All right. Let's go and read a couple articles we have here. So we talked about the recent explosions inside of Russia with these with the drones. We've seen two Russian ammo depots struck, both pretty decently far away from the front line. And it's been a source of heavy cope for the entire pro-Ukrainian community for a couple days now. They've claimed that some 40,000 tons of Russian ammunition was detonated, just using made-up numbers, not based on anything factual. And they are also, over-exaggerating the actual damage that was done to the facility, the facilities. So just to go to a Western article here, Ukrainian drones just blew up 2,000 tons of ammo in southern Russia. The ammo stockpile in Tikhoretsk is or was one of the biggest in Russia. So first and foremost, if you don't know what kind of ammunition was destroyed, I mean, you could take a guess by the explosion or whatever, but if you had thousands of T60 or I can't remember the designation for the Russian landmine, anti-tank mine, but it's like the something 62, right? Or something like that, landmine. If you have a bunch of landmines in storage and they go up, they look the same. If it's artillery shells, they look the same. If it's missiles, they might look a little different, but it's still just a big explosion. TM62, thank you. I couldn't remember the M. You don't know what was destroyed. You don't know if it was artillery shells, which the Russians are producing in massive numbers. You don't know if it's missiles, which the Russians are still producing in massive numbers. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The claim was basically that 12% of Russia's ammunition storage was destroyed with these strikes. Just a completely ridiculous assessment by the accounts on Twitter and stuff that are openly reporting on this. But now we have David Axe here from Forbes, classic joker. He's obviously going to cope through this whole thing. But we'll just read it. 4 days after blowing up a huge amount of a huge Russian ammunition stockpile in the town of Toropets in Western Russia, 300 miles from Ukraine. So here, guys, when they say in Russia, 300 miles from Ukraine, that is your indicator that this was not a missile system that was used. Ukraine does not have any missile systems capable of reaching over 500 kilometers. So this was definitely a drone. And that would also indicate, and should have indicated to people, that the bunker facilities of these ammunition storages were not, at least most of them were not destroyed. And in fact, we do have satellite pictures of one of the facilities, and the destruction is primarily focused in the above ground warehouses. So not even the most vital munitions being stored there, and easily, the roofs are easily penetrated by drones. So not some World War III, esque event where Ukraine is using Western strike systems to target Russian ammunition depots. That's not the case. This was likely just a series of drones, and there were over 100 Ukrainian drones launched in this attack. Ukrainian drones struck again, landing a second blow on the arsenals in Topets on Saturday morning, while also triggering a massive blast in Tikhorets in southern Russia, just 200 miles from the front line in Ukraine. So these explosions were the very, very sought after distraction that Ukraine needed. People haven't talked, like pro-Ukrainian accounts on Twitter, Ukraine battle maps, some of the other ones don't even talk about what's going on in Ukraine. The only thing they talk about is begging for more weapons, blaming the West for failing Ukraine, and then if something blows up, that they talk about it ad nauseum for the foreseeable future, right? It's all they talk about. So a morale hit, again, a PR hit in terms of it affecting the front line. It won't. And I could be wrong. So do your own homework here. Sit down and just think to yourself about the total amount of ammunition that the Russians are using across the front line every day. Think about the amount of ammunition that the Soviets had stored, the Russians then had stored. Think about the production. Think about the foreign acquisition of ammunition by the Russians from North Korea, places like Iran, possibly. This is such a small amount of the actual ammunition, but anything good when everything is going bad is going to be held on to with a death grip, white knuckle it, and never let it go. And that's what this is. This will not even affect the front line. You will not see, if this was happening every single day, then we could talk about it having some effect on the front line. You're talking about two ammunition depots, hundreds of miles from the front line, being destroyed, and then we haven't heard anything for the last 3 or 4 days. No more massive drone strikes, no more ammunition depots going up. So the only thing that's going to happen is ammunition is now going to be rerouted from this depot through another depot into Ukraine. Russia has hundreds of depots all across the country. It is a good hit. Don't get me wrong. It is a military hit. It will have some impact on the overall military situation, but the way that the information space is playing it up and trying to make it seem like this massive event, it's just not the case, and it's just not what's happening. Okay. 2,000 tons of ammo is just a week's worth of glide bombs at most. Even if it was all true, it will just downgrade the bombing campaign for less than a month. No, probably not, because the thing is the Russians don't have the amount of ammunition they need. They have way more than the amount of ammunition that they need and what they're utilizing. They have to have months of extra ammunition in case, think about it, if your production comes to a complete halt for some reason, you want to be able to continue the fight. The Russians aren't utilizing what's coming off the line in Ukraine the next day. It's not like they're just maintaining themselves. They are building upon themselves, building upon their stockpiles, and then utilizing that ammunition in Ukraine. So I don't think you'll see any impact of this. I know you won't see any impact from this in Ukraine. The Russians are going to keep progressing as they have. It has been, 5 days since these strikes have occurred, and nothing has changed on the front line. So we'll wait and see. But again, nothing changed. Nothing changed from Kursk. Nothing changed from these strikes. Nothing changed from strikes on Crimea. Nothing changes from any of these Ukrainian attacks into Russia. The only thing that changes is the Russian, the way that the Russians look at the West and look at Ukraine, and the outcome of the war eventually. Remember, red lines will be enforced at the negotiating table. Negotiating table. Have you seen History Legends' new video on motorcycle tactics? I've seen it, but I haven't read it yet. So I mean, I haven't watched it yet. So I would be, I might do that after this episode. We'll see. But no, I imagine I know exactly what it's about. It's about the recent Russian utilization of motorcycle units to effectively assault territory, evading FPVs and landmines and stuff like that. Hey, Scott, long ago, there were talks about Leopard 1, Leopard 1s as well. Have you seen any Leo 1s used by the UF? Yes, we have a couple. If you go on my profile, on my Twitter profile, you can just search Leopard A1 or Leopard 1A. Is it 1A5? Yeah. And you can see them being destroyed. They weren't utilized very much at all, though, because they are just horrible for the Ukrainian battlefield. They're light, which is good, but they have a very small main armament. The main gun is very small, and their armor is so thin. Any FPV is going to just annihilate these tanks. So nobody wants to get in them. It's sort of a desperation thing. I heard that they were going to send more. But who knows? If they want to put guys into Leopard 1s and send them into battle, by all means. I don't think it's the right idea. Do you think the main Russian push in the coming months will be towards Povrahad? No, I think it's going to be across the entire front line. The only reason I say Povrahad is because that entire area is just open. There's no defense lines there. There's nothing to defend there. So if the Russians get into that space, they're going to have a much easier time pushing towards Povrahad. However, that amount of area, if you look at the map, the amount of area we're talking about from Pokrovsk to Povrahad is huge. I mean, this is a massive chunk of territory. Yes, it's empty. Yes, there's not a lot to control here. But for the Russians to push out and capture all of this, is going to take a lot of men. So this is more realistic for 2025, I think, pushing out into this territory. I think 2024 is mostly going to be spent on completely destroying the Ukrainian army and liberating a majority of the Donbass. I mean, you still have to deal with Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. These battles are going to take some time. Unless something major happens, a major collapse happens. If that does occur, then who knows? But if that occurs, the entire war changes, and any predictions that have been made are just completely pointless. What advantages does the fall of Chasiv Yar give Russia over Ukraine? Easy answer here. If you go and always look at a topographical map. It tells you exactly what you need to know. If you come up here to Chasiv Yar, you can see that Chasiv Yar is placed on the most important high ground in all of eastern Ukraine, the high ground that runs along this canal, basically dividing the Seversk Valley from the Kramatorsk-Slavyansk Valley here. If the Russians capture Chasiv Yar and push along this canal, they will control the dominant high ground in the region, and they will look down on these cities, much like we saw over here in New York and Toretsk. Like I said, the Russians have pushed out, captured all of the high ground, and now the Ukrainians are going to have a very, very hard time sitting down in this creek bed, this valley here. So same goes for Same goes for the Russians pushing up from Bakhmut. Where did I go? Oh, right here. Same goes for the Russians pushing up from Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, rather. It also basically opens up the road to Konstantinivka here, which is another vital area for the Russians to capture. Scott, followers don't get that Russia needs to have ammunition and weapons for all of NATO. Yeah, I mean, yes, this is exactly a good way to think about it. The Russians have enough ammunition, manpower, and equipment to fight a much larger war later. Ukraine is not the primary focus in terms of, it's not the sole focus in terms of where military spending and where equipment and everything goes. It's not, like I said, it's not like it's just coming off the line and being sent directly into Ukraine. Some things might, but other like artillery shells off the production line are likely going into these warehouses, into these ammo depots, and then the older ammunition is being sent to the front. Let's see. What does the anteater banner image on your main profile represent? It's an anteater. It's the coolest animal that has ever existed ever. They can gut people with their claws. They never back down from a fight, no matter what the animal is in front of them. And all they eat is insects like termites and ants, which is so cool that they can kill people and then they eat ants. That's why. Same with pangolins and multiple other small animals like that. I love those animals. I've talked about this multiple times, but that's what the anteater is. It's my favorite animal. Do you think the Russians will try to push towards the Mon? They're going to try to push everywhere. So any questions you guys have about where the Russians might try to push, just assume the answer is yes. If it has some sort of strategic or tactical importance for Russia, they're likely going to push there, especially in the east, especially in the LPR, Zaporozhye, Kherson, and the Donetsk People's Republic. Telegram reports saying that the Romanians are completely encircled and trapped in Vuhledar. That is true. Why does drawing the war out longer have any advantages for either side? Russia issued the warning that they will be radioactive in 72 hours if they don't surrender this. It doesn't work like that. They're just going to say no, and then they're going to say nuke us, and then if they get nuked, it's World War III. Like, that's such a bad bluff to put yourself in that position. So no. Do you think the Russians will try? Oh, I already answered that. Do you think that if Ukraine destroys 15 other large ammo depots, it'll be big problems for Russia? It depends. It depends, because the ammo depots that we were talking about weren't even fully destroyed. They were like 50% destroyed or less than that. Most of it was just the above ground. So even the bunkers, I mean, you're not penetrating a bunker with a drone. So potentially, depends on how much ammunition is lost, depends on its proximity to the front. It just depends on a lot of different factors. But yeah, if they lose 15 huge ammunition depots, I'm sure there's going to be some slowdown on the front. It doesn't look like the Russians are going to lose 15 huge ammunition depots, though. So at least in the time it takes them to, backfill everything that they lost from a detonation. Kalibrated. Do you think the Russians will push to capture Shcherbevnivka, then strike west to take the heaps in Toretsk? Yes. I think it's going to be more like. Hold on, let me see here. Push this down a little bit. I start to slouch in my seat a little bit. Yeah, so I don't think it's really necessarily going to be from this area. They might get behind and then push this way. But if they get back here, the Ukrainians are going to have to retreat from this area anyway, because they're gonna be put into a position where they're basically going to be cut off from escape. So if the Russians get back that far up into here into Petrivka and Shershebanivka, then yeah, I think the battle for Toretsk is basically over. But I think that the actual Tetikons, the waste heaps here, will be taken from the Russians that are already in this area or progressing through the industrial area and then onto the hills. Not so much from this direction, but anything's possible. Again, the Ukrainians love to sit in pockets and they love to just hold out for as long as possible. And that allows for a lot of very goofy things to happen that shouldn't happen, like the Russians getting behind them and then encircling them. So it's always possible. You disagree, the honey badger. Yeah, but everybody likes the honey badger. That's the thing. It's like if you say like orca or something like that, it's like cool, bro. Or brown bear or grizzly bear. Cool. You like the animals that everybody likes. You also like dragons. Sweet, dude. Like, no. Yeah, honey badgers are dope. They can get bit by snakes and just keep going. They take a little nap and just sleep off the venom. They're awesome. But everybody thinks they're awesome. Anteaters are cool because nobody thinks they're cool. Everybody goes, why do you like anteaters so much? Because they will kill people for no reason. Scott, can you briefly explain why the SMO started? Briefly, here we go. Basically, in my personal opinion, the West put a lot of pressure on Russia to try to force regime change, try to get Putin out of office, try to basically re-1991 re-1991ize the Russia. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the West came in, everything was privatized. Basically, oligarchs took over control, and it allowed the West to basically siphon money out of Russia, resources, everything. That has changed now, but the one thing that China needs, and China is the United States' next peer adversary, right? Economically and geostrategically. So the United States really wants to weaken China. And the primary way you can weaken China is by removing a potential energy supplier, and that was Russia. We failed to do that through sanctions. We failed to do that through the coup in Ukraine. The whole Ukraine project, I believe, is a Western project to destabilize Russia, pull Russia away from China. So in 2008, basically the West crossed a line with Russia saying that Georgia and Ukraine were going to join NATO. We then saw the breakout of hostilities in Georgia. Following that, the United States switched to Ukraine as the proxy. The 2014 coup happened. Russia then intervened into Crimea for multiple reasons. One, the Black Sea Fleet headquarters was there, but also a country cannot join NATO, unlikely the EU, while it is in a military conflict, while it has military conflict going on its soil, right? The EU and NATO do not want to inherit a war, especially a war against Russia. So there was the civil war happening in Ukraine from 2014 to 2022, and the Russian occupation, annexation, whatever you want to call it, of Crimea. After the beginning of the war in 2022, the United States, basically the idea was Ukraine is going to start an offensive in the east trying to solve the civil war. Once the civil war is solved, Ukraine would likely be able to join NATO without Crimea. They just basically territorially admit that Russia can forever hold Ukraine or hold Crimea, and then they join NATO. And then NATO can use Ukraine to economically suffocate and isolate Russia, thereby making it weaker. The plan B was basically if the Russians called their bluff, which they did, the Russians invaded. Plan B was a massive sanction package that was supposed to destabilize the Russian economy, and then the collapse of the Putin regime thereby happens. None of that happened, and now you see the United States overinvested in the Ukraine project and failing to achieve their goals in Europe. And now Europe is going to be on the hook for the Ukraine project, even though the West was the ones who started it. So yeah, that's sort of how I think the war in Ukraine started in earnest. Will they be beefing up security at other ammo sites like yesterday? Potentially. I don't know. They might have maximum security. You know, when you guys, a lot of people talk about like Russian failures to intercept things like drones and missiles and stuff like that. But people don't understand that air defense is just a numbers game. You're just trying to reduce the total number of hits you take during an extended period of time. You want to reduce the damage to a point where you can, it's tenable, right? You want to be able to replace what is being lost, and that is the goal of air defense. Air defense is not some 100%, you know, iron curtain that protects you from everything. That's not what air defense is. If Ukraine launches 140 drones at a single target and they're all coming in through different means, they're flying very low, it is incredibly difficult to intercept 140 targets, right? If one of those hits one of those warehouse buildings and causes a chain reaction, you lose an ammo depot. Correct? So they might be beefing up security, but security might already be beefed up. It's just a very big country, very small drones flying very low to the ground, and only one has to get through. And this is the same thing on the Ukrainian side, right? The Ukrainians have almost no air defense now, and they are getting brutalized. The Russians take out what they want, where they want, when they want to, and the Ukrainians have no say. Whereas the Ukrainians have to expend a massive amount of resources every single time to achieve a single victory, right? And that would be one of these ammo dumps. So the way you got to look at this is Ukraine doesn't, NATO, honestly, in Eastern Europe probably doesn't have any ammunition warehouses that can blow up the way you just saw the two Russian ammunition depots blow up. Probably not. I mean, there is huge NATO warehouses, but I'm just saying in terms of like artillery shells, you know, NATO is dry and Ukraine is dry. There are no warehouses in Ukraine that will blow up like we saw in Zhytomyr or Klemensky in 2023. It will be within a day or two. They are currently assaulting it, and the Ukrainians there have been encircled for about a week now. Question: how long does it take for mapping to catch up to the ground truth? Usually, we're on like a 3-day to 1 week delay. In terms of super hyper accurate mapping with geolocations and stuff, that's usually a week behind at least. My mapping is a little bit more aggressive. I go off of confirmation via massive amounts of reports. Sometimes I go off geolocations if I have them available, but you know, my map would be weeks behind if I didn't go off of reports. And my map has been fairly accurate in terms of as the updates come, they prove exactly what my map has been showing for the most part. I make some changes and stuff like that, but usually it's about 72 hours is the information delay coming out of Ukraine. So everything we get is usually 72 to 48 hours old, unless it's like a major event, you know, some video of a massive explosion or something. That stuff comes out a little bit quicker if it's recorded by civilians. But in terms of military reporting, usually there's a 42 to 72 hour delay, 48 to 72 hour delay. Do you think the Russians can remove Putin and replace him with somebody more aggressive? Why? I don't get this. Why would you want somebody more aggressive? Why? You don't want a larger war. You don't want loose cannons. You don't want to become Israel in the way that you're approaching the Ukraine war. You don't want these things. Like, you guys have to use your brains. It should not be an emotional response. It should not be, you do not need somebody more aggressive. The military is already winning in Ukraine. The situation is very good for Russia. Economically, the situation is fine for Russia. Geostrategically, the situation is fine for Russia. Why change something that isn't broken? Why mix up the system when the system is working and heading in the right direction? I mean, hell, even corruption in Russia is being stamped out throughout this conflict, right? Maybe not all corruption, obviously, but the big corruption scandals that are really hurting the military are being handled. So even like the traditionally negative aspects of the Russian Federation, Eastern Europe in general, are being forced out. And Putin, I think Putin has the right idea and is heading in the right direction for Russia. I don't know why you would want to replace him with somebody more aggressive. I don't know why you would want to replace a politician with somebody, a good politician, with somebody who might not be a good politician. Because that's what Putin is. Putin isn't deciding what happens in Ukraine, right? He might have to give a final go-ahead on certain things, but Shoigu and Gerasimov and those guys have more of a say, not Shoigu anymore, but the new defense minister have more of a say in what is actually going on. If you want more aggressive military tactics and stuff like that, replace those guys. Don't replace Putin. That's not going to change anything in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see if I got any more questions in here. So if we're on a 72 to 48 or 24 to 72 hour delay, could that mean that Vuhledar, as we speak, is being evacuated or is already under Russia? Yeah, I told you guys that in my update. I actually made a post about it too. It is being assaulted currently, and it is likely that the Russians probably control most of it. What do you think the mainstream media will say when Russia inevitably wins? All their lying for the sake of propaganda seems so pointless, knowing the truth of the war. They're going to ignore it. They're going to do the same thing they do every time that they're proven wrong or they back the wrong side or something like that happens. They're going to deflect, focus on other news, and just ignore the situation. They're already preparing their audiences. They're already telling them how bad the situation is. They're already going back on their previous statements. And people who read that garbage, unironically, like I kind of read it ironically. I read it to understand what the West is sort of thinking, what the media is putting out, because the media in the West is a really good indicator of what the current administration wants said. It's very easy to see the connection between most mainstream media and the current administration in the White House. So they're just going to roll it off. It's not hard. You just have to pretend like you've been telling everybody the entire time exactly what is happening, truthfully. Yeah, 2 years ago, the Ukrainians were going to win, and then they messed up and they lost. That's not our fault. We gave them everything they needed. And Ukraine isn't really that important to the United States anyway, so why are we making such a big deal of it? Russia's degraded because of it. That's what they're going to say. It's just all nonsense. It's just going to be a continuation of nonsense. Thank you for your question. Unironically, I believe it's a word, isn't it? When you do something unironically, it's not ironic. You're not doing it for irony reasons. Dee had her channel pulled by YouTube today. Yeah, that sucks. I hope it doesn't happen to me. It could happen to any of us. The second you start saying things that people don't like, I do think that potentially they might have been a little bit more aggressive on the Israel stuff, which may have been part of the reason why they got banned. I don't know. I don't know the exact reason. I don't even think they know. So who knows? It sucks. It sucks. I have all of my stuff backed up, all of my videos saved. So if my YouTube channel goes away, it goes away. What are you going to do? We'll start up somewhere else. I'll go all Jackson Hinkle, and every single time I get on here, I'll say YouTube is trying to censor me. So that's what I'll do. All right, guys, that takes us to 1 hour and 4 minutes. Thank you so much for watching. Please, please, please go and like and subscribe and leave a comment. It helps me so much. Click that little notification bell if you like to know when my live streams start. If you don't follow me on Telegram and Twitter already, please go and do that. And if you want to support me financially, or if you just want access to free content, go to my Patreon where you can sign up as a free member and you can support me over there. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate everything you do. Have a great Monday and make this week something special for each and every one of you. Don't let another week just fly by because you only get so many of them. All right. Take care, everybody. Be safe and have a fantastic week. See you on the next one.